Hey everybody, what's going on? We are live here Monday afternoon, and we're going to get our fucking kicks with this guy. I've been waiting, shit, too many years to pull this one off to talk to this guy. People might not know him, but I do. But that's
Most
what
most don't.
matters. His name is Mike. It's. I always want to say Corleone. You always hear that, probably growing up.
My whole life, I mean, it was Michael Corleone. I mean, my whole life. My last name is Corcione, and actually, that's where the Corky came from because I don't know what grade I was in, fifth grade or sixth grade, and the teacher mispronounced my name on the first day of school as Corky Cone or something like that, and then, everybody made fun of it. So that's how it all. That's how that started.
That's he spilled the beans there too. He was also known at one time as Corky Gunn, the guy, the singer of this band. Look at that.
Unbelievable,
And
but true.
actually autographed, or is it over here, by Kelly Nichols.
Yeah, he used to hate autographing those records. He hates that record. He hates that. He hates that. So when I was the road manager for LA Guns in '88, and that was their first tour. And kids would come and ask him to sign the Sweet Pain record. And he'd be like, "No, get out of here." I'm not kidding. So you got one autograph. You're lucky.
Well, the funny thing is, so the Cocked and Loaded tour. LA Guns played the Tower Theater in Upper Darby outside of Philly, and that's
Mhm.
I grew up 2 blocks from there. So I was working during the day. My best friend, he ran down. He's like, "I'll go down. I'll wait outside for the bus, and hopefully I'll get to meet him. I'll get your album signed." And he did, and he freaking got it signed for me. And he didn't put up a fight, I guess, but I got it. So
I'm sure he signed it, but I'm sure he had something to say about it. He was, and then he would freak out the kids because they'd be like, "Yeah, it was Sweet Pain, blah blah," and then he'd be like, "Well, there's the singer right there, the road manager," and they'd be like, "No way!" And it was like, they couldn't believe it. So it was just like that was weird. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was. I just did a whole video on my YouTube channel about that record and how that band even started. So
I watched it last night, and I mean, it answered so many questions. I had no idea, like the whole, like, I mean, you were working behind the scenes with Combat before it was even Combat.
yeah, I worked at that. It started out as a record distributor, which
Hmm.
they sell records to stores, but their niche was import stuff. So they would get
Right.
all these import records, and then that really became huge because in the early '80s, people don't realize
Hmm.
you could have a Clash record come out in England and not be out in America for 6 months after. So
Wow.
imports were very hot. So
Hmm.
and then what happened was the labels, all the big labels, the Clash were on CBS, and they started cracking down and sending out letters, cease and desist. You can't import this record anymore. So the distributor
Oh,
started their own label and started distributing indie stuff. They distributed Megaforce, they distributed Metal Blade, they distributed all exclusive distribution deals where they would press and manufacture the record for the label and distribute it and market it. And I was working there from when they were just an import distributor with 5 or 6 employees, and then
wow.
that's how it all came with Combat and if you really want to know the story, watch that YouTube video. But
Yeah.
it's that band's been a mystery for so long. One record
You,
and disappeared.
yeah. I mean, like, you started seeing the little blurbs pop up in the pictures in the magazines, and then I went to my local record store and ordered it. That would get my imports and stuff, and I got it, and I was so excited. And then it was like, where the hell did they go? There was no internet at the time, and even with the fucking internet, you still can't find nothing about them. There's like I don't think I've ever seen one live picture of you guys. Like,
Yeah, I mean, in the the band was there was the original band, which was a 5-piece band,
hmm.
and then one member was asked to leave, and then it became a 4-piece band, and then two guys left that 4-piece band, two other guys came in. So by the time the record was really out there, Kelly had already left, the drummer had already left. We had two
Wow.
new guys, and but we had a lot of coverage in those, like we were in Metal Edge, we were in Faces, Rocks, and all these magazines and stuff. So we had some coverage, but we didn't do a hell of a lot of gigs. I mean, Sweet Pain probably played total, I don't know, maybe 20 gigs, maybe.
Wow.
Maybe. So there wasn't a lot of stuff out there, but there's a guy that wrote a review of the Sweet Pain record. I want to think it might have been Sleaze Grinder or one of these websites.
Okay.
This guy wrote a review of that record and totally got it. And that's the only guy I've ever seen really get what Sweet Pain was. And he wrote this review, and it was like unbelievable. I was like, wow. And this is way after the fact. It's like, one of those, I think his, the whatever it was called was like, the Digging the Vaults or something, some overlooked record. And, it's crazy. I mean, how that record is like, I mean, you watched the video, so it was recorded and mixed in like 4 days. It was so thrown together so quickly, the whole thing, that it's a miracle that we're still talking about it. You know what I mean?
Well, before I even forget, I got to say this too. Like even like the front and the back cover. And I've said this in other interviews, and I said that when I interviewed Kelly, I said it to him too. This album cover, front and back, is probably one of my all-time favorite album covers, because I remember being, like 14, 15 years old when the album came out, when I got it, and just laying in my bed and just always staring at it and being like, oh shit, I didn't see that last time. Or I always constantly was finding new things hidden throughout the front and back album cover. I just always loved it.
Yeah, Kelly hates that album cover. He when he saw that album cover, he was just like, no. He was so upset. But the idea for that album cover came from, there was a record store on Long Island which was very, very popular, called Slip Disc, and he specialized in metal and all that stuff, imports. And I was very tight with the owner, and he was like, he's like, this is what you should do for your cover. And he kind of explained that the backstage with all the stuff everywhere. And he kind of laid that out. He actually got I think he was credited in the album notes, cover idea or whatever. But that was fun setting that up. I mean, a lot of that stuff was we just took it out of our room or whatever. But yeah, it's very of the time, man. It was, I mean, you got to remember there was no Faster Pussycat record out at that time, and Hanoi Rocks was just starting to get big, or get noticed. I shouldn't say big. And then Poison was out. Poison was already out, but we wanted to be, Kiss meets the Sex Pistols. That as bizarre as that sounds, that's kind of what that band was. It was very aggressive. It wasn't, it was to be honest, it was a very dark period for me. I mean, there was just a lot of crazy shit going on and drugs and stuff. So it was definitely the 80s, man. It was 1985. So, this is pre Faster Pussycat and Guns N' Roses and all that stuff. And it was like much more street, and people weren't ready for it.
Totally.
They were like, everybody wanted it to be, at that time in 85, if you weren't a thrash band, they expected you to be slick and polished and be like, very slick to get on the radio. Or if you weren't that, you became heavy and dirty and you were a thrash band. So we were like very edgy. That's what that review this guy wrote was very on top of that to me. Is a very edgy record. It wasn't like, it wasn't meant to sound, like Warren or anything,
Yeah.
So it was just, I think it was it would have never lasted, that band anyway, but I think that record was ahead of its time.
It totally was. Now, how about like watching that video that you talked about on your YouTube channel where you're telling the story about the band? The one thing that I got out of it is like, you never were like really, you weren't a singer. You weren't like looking to get into a band or anything, it sounds like.
No, I was always involved in the scene, whether I was, going to see friends' bands and, helping them, whatever. I was always involved, and I was comfortable being behind the scenes and stuff. I never thought I was going to be in a band, because I really was not a singer. And you have to remember also, in 1985, people expected you to sing. There was no Nirvana at this point. You know, either if you Nirvana made punk rock, commercial, if you want to call it that. To me, their attitude and their whole approach was punk rock, but it got on the radio because they had really good songs. So if you couldn't sing, you could have been a thrash guy and just screamed and stuff, and that would have been okay. I was kind of like neither. So, and I never thought I was going to be in a band. So, when the owner of Combat said you should just start a glam band, because they were trying to sign somebody and they couldn't find anybody. Everybody had already been signed. Wasp, Rat, Motley, Poison, Keel, you name it, they were all signed, and there was nobody else. And the second wave of LA bands, the Guns N' Roses and LA Guns and all that, hadn't started yet. And there was nobody in New York. New York is not really a rock and roll town, no matter what anybody says, despite the Ramones and all that stuff and the CBGB period.
Right.
New York's not really a rock and roll town. It's never been. It's more about disco and dinner parties than it's not like Philly, man. That's a rock town. You know what I mean? So it just I lost the point I was trying to make, but I was never trying to be in a band, and they asked me to start a band, and I did, and they backed everything with money and pressed a record. It's like, why not? You know what I mean?
Crazy.
And that's how it all happened. And it from the time we said, yes, let's do this, to the time that the record came out was a very short period. It was done very quickly. It was about, let's just get it in the marketplace, and sell some records, as opposed to any grand scheme of a marketing plan or anything. It was just like, let's press it and get it out there. We have a glam band now. That's just kind of what it was.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It's, if you really are into the band or you want to know more, that video I did pretty much sums it up. I mean, there's I could talk about more stories and shit that went on.
Sure.
After a while, he just gets, how many crazy stories can you tell?
So, but as it was happening, and you're going through, and then you're going through member changes, but you're playing shows, and people are seeing this album cover and stuff like that. Were you digging it? Was it like, all right, this is what I want to do now?
I mean, I was digging it because anything I do, I put my whole self into it 110%. Anything I do, if I really want to do it. So I was into it, but I never thought we were going to be, Aerosmith or anything. I mean, I was into it because, I was kind of like, I didn't have to worry about anything really. They paid for rehearsals. I had people booking some gigs. It was like I was still a DJ on the weekends. I was a nightclub DJ for years, so I was still DJing on the weekends. If I had a gig, I'd take off for a night or whatever. So I was just in that world of nightclubs and DJing, and I was in the band. It was just crazy time. I mean, I was into it, but I tended to get too fucked up. Drinking and smoking hash and snorting blow. I mean, that's what you did at every friggin' gig. So it was like, and again, what really gave me the confidence, honestly, to do that and say, I'm not a real singer, but what gave me the confidence was seeing Motley Crue. When I saw Motley Crue, and you got to remember, prior to Motley Crue, when you'd go see, I don't care who it was, Rainbow, Pat Travers, Bryan Adams, Deep Purple, everybody played and sang well.
Yeah.
And then Ozzy's Ozzy. Ozzy goes back to the friggin' late 60s. So Ozzy is what he is. But Motley Crue, when first time I saw Motley Crue, I'm like, wow, this is like punk rock. Like anybody can do this. Because Vince Neil sounded horrible. Nikki Sixx's bass sounded horrible. Mick Mars is a pretty good guitar player.
Yeah.
And Tommy Lee was I don't know about now, but he was a really, really good drummer, and he held the whole thing together. Without Tommy Lee, Motley Crue could have never done it because, I think Mick Mars is a solid guitar player. Nikki Sixx is not a great bass player, but Nikki Sixx is the brains of Motley Crue. And, Vince and I was like, wow, this doesn't sound good. Like, we could do this, and that's kind of where it came from, because Motley Crue, up until Shout at the Devil, was like punk rock. I don't care. Forget the costumes and all that stuff. Their whole attitude and approach was punk rock. And then by Theater of Pain, they became much bigger, and then they wanted to be, huge and become more arena rock.
Right.
But seeing Motley Crue open for Ozzy was edgy. It was not slick. It was edgy, and it was like, no one really talked to the audience the way Vince Neil talked to the audience. No one. David Lee Roth was the guy that was like the party guy. Hey, I'm gonna get party. And Vince Neil was, talking. He really got into the descriptions and definitions of sexual things. He was like, no one had said that stuff before. No one had ever come out on stage and said, "Who wants to eat pussy?" Like, nobody. So that was also part of the thing with Sweet Pain was, well, we can just do anything now, say anything and do whatever. Right. And, so out of the 20 gigs we played, there was one big gig at Lemoore East that was, the word had gotten out, and, there was like 2,000 people at the gig. We headlined. Okay. And then it went downhill from there. So it wasn't very much of, people came to see us, but the big gig at Lemoore East was the one where Richie Rano from Stars came up and played on Subway Terror with us, and all that kind of stuff. But there was no real crazy gigs. We did some out gigs outside of New York. We played in Philly. We opened for Cinderella at the Empire Rock Room.
Oh, really? Okay.
In early '86, we opened for Cinderella at the Empire Rock Room. We played Pittsburgh, Cleveland a couple times, but we didn't really go a lot of places. But we opened that show for Ace Frehley at Lemoore, Brooklyn, which was like total punk rock. I mean, people were throwing stuff at the stage, and I was bleeding. It was crazy. That was a gig that you were like, yeah, this band is fucking awesome, or you were like, this band sucks. It was one of the two. And we made a lot of friends that night, and we made a lot of enemies at the same time. It was, nobody had seen anything like that. So it was very punk rock to me. And I don't think Kelly ever wanted to be punk rock, and the drummer never wanted to be punk rock. They wanted to be in big bands. I mean, the drummer of Sweet Pain ended up in the Throbs. They got a deal on Geffen. Kelly ended up in LA Guns. So, but I always knew Kelly, he wasn't the greatest bass player at that time in Sweet Pain days, but I knew he had the personality and everything to go to the top, and he did. So he played the friggin' Garden, opening for AC/DC. So to me, that's kind of making it,
Yeah, absolutely.
Regardless if he made any money, because he didn't. But, I knew he could go all the way. And he left, and I'm like, God bless, man.
Wow.
So I knew him way before Sweet Pain. I mean, he was a roadie. I knew him forever. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, me and him had a lot of fun, man. Over the years, that guy's a lot of fun, or he was. I mean, when we were young and crazy, it's just some of the most fun times with Kelly Nichols.
So when the band ends up completely just breaking up, you end up going back to work behind the scenes again with, I guess, with Combat. Is that what it was, or?
Yes. Well, at the time, you're talking, I don't know, late '86. Sweet Pain had ended, and the owner of the company said, "Hey, come back to work. I want you to do radio promotions." So at the time, by that time it had split. There was a Relativity staff and a Combat staff. So the Combat staff, they those guys were working, Zest Records or whatever, to college radio, metal radio shows, which are usually on at 1 a.m. and stuff. So they very specialized. So I was the radio promotions director for Relativity Records, which was the first label they started, which was a much more of a mainstream label. And then I did radio promotion for, I don't know, a couple months, and then he made me director of promotions for all the labels, which meant, you're dealing with all the advertising and, buying ads and Rip Magazine and doing radio stuff. So I was doing that for the label. And then that was, now you're in 87. But Relativity wanted to be big. They wanted to be on major FM radio. They wanted to be on NEW in New York, which is like,
Okay.
Big station. So
Yeah.
they needed a band to do that with. Most of the bands they had were college alternative, like Scruffy the Cat or Defenestration, Dancing Hoods, Thelonious Monster, all alternative college radio bands. So they signed this band Relativity called the Brandos.
Okay.
That were like in the mold of Creedence meets John Cougar meets very mainstream. No one wanted to sign the band. The owner of the label was like, "What do you think of these guys?" I go, "This is the band that'll get you on the radio." And we did. We ended up getting that band. We hired indie radio promoters, which doesn't exist anymore. You hire these guys, like we had a guy in Texas. You pay him every week, and he makes sure you're covered in Texas. And we did that all over the region, so you got radio play. And we spent a lot of money, and we got the Brandos major radio play. The same time that was happening, we put out Joe Satriani Surfing with the Alien on Relativity. And then they licensed the Broadway show Les Miserables, which started on Broadway, but there was no cast album. So they imported the cast album from Europe and did a deal, not imported, I'm sorry. They did a pressing and distribution deal to put out the Les Mis soundtrack. And that got in every major chain, Tower, Record World, So those three records, Brandos, Joe Satriani, and Les Miserables in 1987, put Relativity on the map. And then in 89, Relativity in Combat sold the whole thing, distribution and everything, to Sony for millions of dollars. So 87, he hired me in 87 to help break that label. And what you do to break a label is you got to spend a shitload of money, and you got to go out and you got to schmooze everybody. Dinners, nightclubs, radio conventions. There's a million conventions, the Gavin convention, all these conventions that used to happen with radio people. You got to go, you got to schmooze people and throw parties, and that's how you do it. That's how you did it in 1987. And after a year of that, I'm like burned out on this. And then Kelly Nichols had asked me to be their road manager for LA Guns. While I was working at Relativity, every month I'd be going out to California to meet with the West Coast people, and I would connect with Kelly, and then Kelly introduced me to Mick Cripps and Tracy, and then I started hanging out, and those guys were broke. They'd made their record, wasn't coming out for another 6 months. They had no money, so I'd take them out to dinner, and we'd go to strip clubs, and I'd pay for everything, and I took care of those guys really well. They'd pass out, and I'd make sure they were in bed, and whatever. And they're like, "Dude, you need to be our road manager." And I'm like, "Why not?" So, well, to be honest, I had also gotten an offer to go work for Atlantic Records and run the heavy metal department.
Okay.
And I met the guy I was supposed to be my boss, and I just didn't gel with the guy. And then Kelly called like a few days later, and I made the decision to go work for LA Guns, and I went to work for LA Guns end of December of 87. And then I went on the road with them the whole year of 88. So from working at an import record distributor in 1979, it all led me, and I worked for LA Guns in 88. It was all connected.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. I mean, so it's, I didn't plan any of it. It just happened.
It just happened. That's what it sounds like.
I've always been one of those guys that's just like, let's just do it. Let's just do it. And if I felt good about it in my gut, I would say that.
But how about like, as after Sweet Pain is done and all, and you're going through and you're working the grind now behind the scenes with this stuff, and even then, once you get the offer from Kelly and LA Guns to go work with them, was there any point in your head you're saying to yourself, "Man, I miss Corky Gunn. I miss doing that"?
No, never.
Really?
No, I had those guys in LA Guns to this day call me Corky. So anybody that calls me Corky, I know they know me from the old days. I'm very tight with Mick Cripps, and we talk all the time. And he calls me Corky. His wife calls me. I mean, that's just So, but I never was like, oh, I want to be that guy again. I honestly, man, I partied my ass off in 84, 85, 86. Those 3 years. By the end of like middle of 86, when Sweet Pain broke up, I go, I can't go on like this anymore. I've got to do something.
Wow.
So I kind of just stopped. I just stopped myself from partying. And then I had a bad incident with LA Guns when I first started working with them, and they played a New Year's Eve gig at the Troubadour, 87 going into 88.
Okay.
And there was coke around. I was up for like 3 days. It was insane. And that was the last time I did cocaine was New Year's Eve, 1987. And
Wow.
and I said that, I was just sick of it anyway by that point.
Mm-hmm.
I'd already said, I'm done with this. I've had too many bad experiences. So by the time that happened, that New Year's Eve, that was the capper. I was like, fuck, no more, and I didn't. And I've never done it since. So I've always had that kind of a constitution where I just, I just, when I'm done with something, I'm done. And I just didn't need any. My rehab was 3 or 4 insanely bad incidents that made me stop. Then I went on the road, and I knew, and I was never a big weed smoker, but once I got on the road, I became a pothead because those guys were smoking pot morning, noon, and night. Well, some of the guys. So, but yeah, I just, I never wanted to be that guy again. It was a time and a place, and it's over. And I'm like, I was able to switch and I just cut my hair and went to work for Relativity, because I was done.
So crazy.
I was ready for the next chapter. But, the guy that owned the company knew I was the kind of a guy, and I had the kind of a personality that could go out and help make that label successful.
Right.
And because, it's 95% of it. You've got to have good music and something that's credible, or you're never going to get on the radio. But
Sure.
I would say 90% of it after that is relationships and schmoozing people and hooking guys up with whatever they need. That's what it all is. And then people are like, more apt to deal with you. It was so saturated in those days with drugs and women and it was crazy. And radio guys that are in charge of a radio station that can really help you, they have a wife at home and they're at a convention in LA, so that's what it was all about. And you build a relationship, and I'm sure this kind of stuff still goes on. But like,
probably
there's no more guys to schmooze because every radio station is owned by one person. You know what I mean? It's like no one. There's no more. Everything is whatever it is. I don't know. Clear Channel or so it's like there's no more individuality. Giving a guy some cocaine is not going to get you on the radio anymore. You've got to find the guy at the top of the pyramid and give him whatever he wants, but it's just hard to reach.
Now you got to find the guy in the Spotify offices and drop him the cocaine to get on a fucking playlist.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't do that because there's cameras everywhere and they'll see you.
Yeah, exactly. It's too funny.
The biggest thing about those days, no cameras, no security cameras, no cell phone cameras. There was none of that. So people got away with all kinds of shit.
Yeah.
There's no cameras. I mean, I lived in New York and I've worked in New York City and to this, if you anywhere you are in New York, I don't care where you are, you're on camera. The only place you might not be is in a bathroom of a restaurant.
Right.
Other than that, you're on camera everywhere. So it's just different. You can't do it. And even if you wanted to do it, you can't, it's like there's no people more aware. The eye of the sky is watching,
Oh, big time. Will the Sweet Pain album ever get re-released?
I don't know, man. You know what? I've had about 3 or 4 different people that wanted to put it out or say they wanted to put it out, and then I don't know what happens. I have my ideas. There's people out there that might have been involved that put out bad info or don't do that or like there used to be a Wikipedia page on Sweet Pain, and it got taken down, and I kind of know why, I think, but I don't care. It's like I'm beyond it. I don't give a shit. There's people still holding on to old anger. And that's how I see it. But I mean, I have the rights to it. I remixed that record.
Okay.
I remixed that record with my friend Bruno Ravel, who's the bass player in Danger Danger. Me and Bruno remixed that. I added bonus tracks, couple of bonus tracks, no, one bonus track that wasn't released, and a couple of live tracks and some interviews, and I put this whole reissue together. And I was just I emailed a guy, I don't know, recently, and he said, "This is amazing." He was, "I'm so into it." Blah 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 blah. He never responds to me, so I don't know what happened between him saying, "I'm really into this, I want to put this out," to "he won't return my emails." So I don't know.
I have a guy that I'm very tight with. He's out of Vegas, and that's one of the things he does. He does PR work, but that's one of the things he does is he does reissues of stuff. And I'm going to put you guys in contact because I want to fucking. His name's Vanity Music.
Okay, I don't know who that is,
Yeah.
but I haven't heard of him. So I mean, but there's other people that there's got to be 4 or 5 labels that and they pulled out. So
okay.
It's never been released on CD ever.
Yeah.
And it was only an album and a vinyl and cassette. So I wanted to try somebody to do a vinyl reissue with all the bonus stuff because everybody's into vinyl. But what I did find out, which is interesting, CDs are kind of making a comeback now. Everybody's collecting CDs again, but it never really stopped in South America and some countries.
Okay.
Like I know Cleopatra, the label Cleopatra. So I know some people up there, they sell a lot of CDs to South America. So because vinyl is a very hipster kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? There's nobody some poor kid in South America worrying about vinyl. That CDs are cheap and it's easy. You can get a little boom box or whatever. So I wanted to release it on CD and vinyl, but I mean, the only thing I don't have is the artwork. I want to do all new artwork for it, and but I have it ready to go. I mean, it's. I think since Bruno and I remixed it, it's punchier, and I left in a lot of the, the pre, roll tape and all that kind of stuff, like all the goofing around, and you can hear in the background, like making jokes, and then the song starts. So I left a lot of that stuff in. But yeah, man, anything if you want to put him in touch with me, if he,
I will. I definitely will. I guarantee he'll be dead once I tell him. Because there's a band out of Philly that I manage. He just put their album out, and there's a band from Philly that was signed to CBS. He's getting ready. He's trying to get them situated to re-release their CBS record, and they put an album out before they got signed to CBS. That was a huge thing in Philly. You might remember they were called Tees.
Oh yeah, I remember Tees.
Yeah. So
they had all the
rags.
The rags, yeah. I remember them.
They're back together. The second lineup that got signed to CBS. They just actually played 2 weeks ago. Yeah, down in Philly. Yeah.
I mean, it's great when people are still doing it. It's like somebody's got to keep it alive. I'm not one of those guys, but like it's. I think it's awesome, man. It's like I wish there was some real. You could have the greatest young band out there, and then no one's going to care. The sad part about the internet is the good and the bad is anybody can get their music out there now. Anybody can stream their stuff, but there's no focus on anybody to make them stars. So, the greatest band in the world is going to go unnoticed because there's not a CBS machine pushing it into making it big. Those days are gone. So it's more about grassroots, finding your niche, finding your audience, selling stuff online, selling t-shirts, playing some gigs. There's still bands doing it. I mean, I give them all the credit in the world, man. God bless. Keep it going.
Absolutely. So all right. So you go out with LA Guns, and you were with them for how long?
I was with them. I worked for them for about a year.
Okay.
I was on the road with them for like 10 months in '88. Um, and, again, it was no computers, no cell phones, no
Hmm.
ATM cards, no nothing. So you're out on the road and you've got I used to wear a fanny pack and you'd have rolls of quarters because you had to stop and pay phones all the time.
Right.
And that's, there was everything was cash. If I had a wire, you'd collect a bunch of money and you'd have to wire 20 grand back to the office. I remember going to, after the LA Guns opened for AC/DC at the Spectrum,
Okay.
I had to wire money back to LA and I had to get a cab to drive me to a Western Union. And the Western Union is always in the worst part of town. I got out of this cab in Philly with $20,000 in this fanny pack to go wire it back to LA. I didn't think I was going to make it out. Like it was, everybody knew what was in that bag. So that's the kind of stuff you had to do. It wasn't like, oh, I'll just, Venmo,
Yeah.
It was hairy like that, but I was used to that kind of thing. I mean, I grew up in New York. I could handle myself. So I was like, I wasn't too worried, but like, there's been instances where stuff like that would happen or, again, there's no phones, there's no cameras. Somebody could, hit you on the head, take your money and throw you behind a building and there's no one to know any wiser. Where's Corky? I haven't seen him. You know what I mean? So it was a crazy time as far as touring goes. A friend of mine works for the Rolling Stones, so I go to a lot of Stone shows, and just to see how that operates,
Ooh.
it's like a military operation. It's unbelievable. And
Wow.
then in 1988, it was you're like pirates out there with a paper map and a CB radio. It was a lot of fun, but very stressful. Crazy times.
So how come you stopped working with them? Was it your decision, their decision, or?
That was I just cracked up. I after 10
Wow.
months on the road, I just snapped. And I mean, those guys pulled a joke on me, and I was in no mood, and I just snapped, and I was like, that was it, and I just quit. And then. But I was always very tight with Mick and Kelly, and I always stayed in touch with those guys. And then, so by the time Cocked and Loaded came around, after I left LA Guns, they came and played New York after that, the Limelight, and I saw them there. I mean, I would see them and stuff, but I couldn't be on the road with them for 10 months. So when Cocked and Loaded came around, I went out to see them. Mick's like, you got to come out. So I came out to the first couple shows in Texas, and then after I don't know, a month or so, he calls me back. He's like, hey, you got to come out on the road, man. He's like, we hate our road manager. Come out on the road. I'm like, what do you mean come out on the road? So he's like, yeah, you stay in my room. You don't have to worry about anything. We can't pay you, but we'll take care of all the expenses. I'm like, well, and I was DJing at the time still. Now I went back to being a DJ. I was working a bunch of clubs in Manhattan. And then I said, oh, whatever. So I'd go out with them for like 2 weeks at a time. I'd go out for 2 weeks and then I'd go back home. And then they'd call me again a few weeks later and then I'd go back for a little bit, just because, their road manager, he wasn't a bad guy. He was just, they had switched management by this point. They were with Alan Kovac, who now manages Motley Crue. At the time, his big act was Richard Marx. Who was huge. Yeah. So he had been out on tour, this guy, with a lot of like wimpy bands, and they just didn't connect with the guy. He didn't do a bad job. They were used to me, and, taking care of every little thing for them. So I just went out on the road for a couple of weeks at a time, and I'd, hang out and keep everybody amused and happy. And then I'd go away and then I'd come back again. So I did go back out with them, not in an official capacity of getting paid, but I would go out on the road with them, Cocked and Loaded. I might have done, by Hollywood Vampires, it was kind of about to be over. So I don't remember doing a lot of shows with Hollywood Vampires outside of New York.
Now, for the Cocked and Loaded tour, did you go to the Tower Theater show in outside of Philly? Do you remember that?
I can't remember. I probably did because those were the swings I would do. New York, Philly, Boston, Rhode Island, Washington, Baltimore, that whole Northeast swing. Those were the swings I would do.
Right.
Mostly. So I probably was at that Philly show, I would imagine.
Because like I said, I grew up 2 blocks away from the Tower. That was like my fucking town. Like everybody there knew me, so I was like, the fucking mayor of Upper Darby. And I had heard that LA Guns was having dinner, a big dinner down at the bar across the street from the Tower, down in there, like, the big catering room, I guess it is.
Right.
So I was like, fuck it, I don't care, I'm going in. And I just walked in. I was only 18 too. I walk in the bar and I go downstairs, and I remember walking downstairs and opening the doors to the room, and it just like everybody stopped and turned to look at me, and I was like, and I'm like looking at like Tracy and Mick and Kelly, and I'm just like, oh fuck. And there's like 50 people down there. I'm like, wrong room. I just fucking turned around and walked out.
I might have been there. I can't be sure, but I mean, I always did the Northeast stuff because it was close to home, with them. I actually saw, I don't know what year it was. It might have been 2003. I saw the Rolling Stones at the Tower Theater.
Okay.
They would do, I think it was the Licks tour, and they played stadiums, arenas, and theaters.
Yeah.
And they played the Tower Theater in Philly, and I was at that show. That was a great show.
That's awesome.
So, is that still there, the Tower Theater?
Tower Theater's still there, yeah.
Wow, amazing.
Oh, yeah. Still having shows. They took the tower, though, off the top for some reason. They said it was not structurally safe anymore or something. They took that down, but yeah, they're still having shows there.
Unbelievable. I mean, New York, same thing. Beacon Theater's still there, so a lot of those theaters, though, are also protected, landmark buildings and stuff. I know the Beacon is, so, they'll never tear them down, but they'll always tear down every 20 years, some arena and building.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So after the whole LA Guns thing, like, what do you do then? Like, where does your life go?
I didn't know. I had no clue. I went back to New York and I slept for a month or so, and then I started my life in music as a nightclub DJ in 1978. Right. I was playing records from the late 70s. So I went back to New York and I started a couple of rock clubs. I started a club called Hot Rocks. That was a guy owned a nightclub, and every Wednesday he gave me the Wednesday night, and we called it Hot Rocks, and it was a rock dance club. No bands. I just played music, and girls and guys danced. So I mean, I wasn't playing thrash metal. I'm playing Skinny Bop and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and then some people at another place said, "Hey, that night over there is packed all the time. Let's do a rock club at our place." So then I started another rock club called Raw in Bayside, Queens.
Okay.
And then one of the promoters at Raw was booking and shows at Limelight, Manhattan, and he brought me into Limelight, and then I started DJing at Limelight. So by 1990, I'm working at these 3 clubs, three different rock clubs.
Yeah.
And then when I started working at Limelight, the guy that owned Limelight also owned 3 other clubs in Manhattan, the Tunnel, the Palladium, and Club USA. And I started working at some of those clubs too. So from 1990 to, all through to mid 90s, 97 in there, 98, I worked at all these clubs for all those years. Wow. Then I got married in 93. My son was born in 94. And then, life takes a different path. It's 2023 almost, and I'm still here. So it's knock on wood,
That's crazy. Yeah. It's funny because like I after the whole Sweet Pain thing, like I would literally sit there getting all the magazines every month, like waiting to see, all right, where's Corky Gunn? Where's Corky Gunn? Where's Corky Gunn? And then, for years later, always wondering, like, whatever the fuck happened to that dude? Where the hell is he at? Like, never knowing you worked with LA Guns, never knowing nothing. And then, I guess it was like 6 months ago, I saw I came across your Instagram page. It popped up in my feed, and I was looking through. I'm like, I think that's fucking Corky. And then I'm going through, and I found you had some old pictures of you with like Nikki Six or whatever. I'm like, finally, it's him. He's alive.
Yeah, you know, it was, there was never any gaps, you know, between, you know, Sweet Pain and then Relativity and then LA Guns, and then I went, you know, it was like I really kind of like just, it all flowed, man. I didn't know when I when I left LA Guns, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no clue. All I
Right.
knew was I was in bad health. I felt like shit, and I was stressed to the max. So I went back to New York and regrouped and started those rock clubs. Um, you know, in there I did other stuff. I managed a band in the early mid '90s called Rosary Violet. I managed this band. They were like a cross between, they were like a goth Alice in Chains.
Okay.
Um, um, the singer was absolutely a star. Could have been on the cover of Rolling Stone kind of thing, but it just, you know, fell apart. You know,
Sure.
the singer got an inheritance when he reached a certain age, like a trust fund, and he lost his mind, you know, and that was the end of the
Wow.
band. But they were really close. I mean, we had a lot of labels checking them out, and they were really there. So I did stuff like that. I always had other projects going on.
Mhm.
I booked a tour. Mick Cripps called me in 92, and he had this band that he was doing out in LA called Crumble Pie.
Okay.
And they played a place called the Coconut Teaser. It was not there anymore
Hmm.
in Hollywood. And they just did cover songs, but they did like really cool, obscure stuff. They weren't playing, you know, Freebird, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he called me. He's like, "Hey, book us a tour. We want to come play the East Coast." And the Crumble Pie was Mick Cripps, Spike and Griff from the Choir Boys,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Donnie Gray, who was a drummer in Burning Tree. So it was like an all-star kind of band. And I booked them 9 shows in 9 days. Played the Chestnut Cabaret in Philly.
Okay.
And played those kind of places. You know, that was really a lot of fun. It was not done for any reason other than just to have fun.
Sure.
And you know, I've always done other stuff in there, but the '90s, for the most part, I was a DJ in clubs when there were still huge nightclubs in Manhattan. I mean, they're all gone now.
Yeah.
But you know, clubs that would hold 3,000 people, 4,000 people. I mean,
Mhm.
again, they couldn't exist today because of the world. You know,
Yeah.
you can't have they Tunnel, which was a huge nightclub. Tunnel used to do a hip hop night on Sundays. That was insane. That was like, it was $50 to get in on Sundays at Tunnel.
Holy shit.
But you'd have, you know, the big DJ was Funkmaster Flex, and they'd have all the rap guys wanted to come and
Mm.
get up and do for free.
Yeah.
They do their thing, whether it was, you know, Biggie Smalls or Jay-Z, and all these guys were in there. It was insane night. So there was like 4,000 people in there on a hip hop night,
Wow.
patting people down, serious patting people down, taking guns away from people. That could never exist today.
Nah.
You know, it's just a time and a place. So, you know, I always say you know, 9/11 changed everything.
Hmm.
And what we're going through now is changing it again. And
Yeah.
it just keeps tightening and tightening. So it's harder to have fun, or, you know, everybody's got a different definition of fun, but it's hard to be, that freedom doesn't exist. And when there's no
Yeah.
freedom, people are more cautious about everything they do. You know,
Absolutely.
well, some of that is for good. I'm not saying it's
Hmm.
all, you know, some of it's good that people are cautious and, you know, think a second thought before they do something. But, you know, it's a fine balance. I just, you know, it's hard to explain to people why it'll never be that again. You know,
Yeah.
young kid, somebody's 18, 19, they just they can't
Mm.
grasp, you know. It's like listening to my grandfather talk about World War II, you know what I'm saying? I can't grasp.
Have you been doing anything in the music business, the last few years at all, or are you just totally out of that?
I'm kind of out of it. I've been, you know, really writing a lot. I've got a finished screenplay that I've been trying to get made for a long time, about a DJ in a nightclub in the early 80s, when the drinking age was 18, and there's a photo on a driver's license, about that world. I've got a screenplay. I've got my book coming out. I was trying to get it published by a few different people, and I said, screw it, I'm just self-publishing it now. So that should be available via Amazon and all that stuff, early next year, 2023.
Okay.
I'm working on a streaming series, like a weekly series kind of thing. I've got a lot of writing I'm doing. That's where I'm really focusing my time, is putting down all the stories and all the ideas I've had onto paper. But that's really my focus. I mean, music, I don't really go anywhere. I don't go out. I don't do anything. I mean, I live in the Southwest and in the desert, and there's nothing around. You just got solar power, you know what I'm saying? So I grew up on a bar stool. So prior to all this stuff we're talking about, my life from the time I was born to the time I reached 18 years old is a whole nother crazy story. So I grew up on a bar stool, man. I was around enough psycho, crazy, drunken, wacko people in my life. I like being alone in the desert, man. You know what I mean? I was just in LA recently. I went out there to meet with some people about my screenplay, and I went to see Mick. Mick Cripps has got a band that plays every Friday at the Market Tavern in Los Angeles,
Okay.
which is at the farmers market off Fairfax. He's got an incredible band. He plays every Friday, and they do all cover songs, but it's like what I would describe as pub rock. They're
Okay.
playing the Kinks and the Stones, and they're doing Dr. Feelgood, and they're playing really 50s, 60s, 70s British kind of stuff. And the band is really good. He's got a great band. They play every Friday. It's free. And I was out in LA, and I went to see him, and I hadn't really been out anywhere in a long time. And that was good for one night. Like, okay, I'm back in the desert now. You know what I mean? But if you're in LA, if you're in California, you got to go see. The band is called the Long Shadows.
Okay.
And they play every Friday at the Market Tavern at the Farmers Market in Los Angeles. Really good rock and roll. You know who plays the drums? The drummer is Clem Burke, the drummer of Blondie.
Okay.
When he plays drums with them, and then he goes out on the road with Blondie for a few weeks and comes back and he plays drums. So it's a really cool band. It's a fun band. You go have a beer and they serve food, and it's free.
That's
So
awesome.
if whatever's left of cool rock and roll in LA, I don't know what else is out there, but those guys are definitely, if you're into the old stuff or you're into that old vibe, go see those guys. They're really good, very talented.
What did you think about when the whole two LA Guns thing was happening, or it still is technically?
I mean, I've talked about in my YouTube videos. I go into the whole why LA Guns, how they broke up, and what happened. But there was always tension in that band from the beginning, from the earliest days, 1984, 85. There's always been tension, no loyalty. Sell your mother down the river for fame, kind of thing. I mean, that's just what LA Guns was. I mean, I'm not knocking them, but like once there was two versions, and again, I was so plugged into those guys and talked to Mick all the time, and Kelly, Mick more. But I knew what was going on all the time. So forget about who owns the name. When Tracy left Steve and Phil to go do Brides of Destruction, the version that was the real LA Guns was Steve's version. Yeah. So Tracy started another LA Guns after the fact because he had to pay the bills. So it's just so ridiculous. I mean, and now, but again, I talk about this in my YouTube video. Steve was the older member of the band, much more experienced, much more seasoned. He'd been in Wasp. He'd been in a band called the Bees, had a deal on Epic Records. He'd been in a lot of the business that these guys had not been in. So Steve handled the business. He was the liaison between the band and the management and the record company and stuff. So, Steve's filing papers and doing whatever and I don't know what he put his name on, but it came down to where Tracy and Phil control the image and the badge logo and the name. So Steve's now Riley's LA Guns. But hey, man, I've seen some versions of LA Guns that were just horrible, just like thrash metal. I don't even know what it was. I saw them in places, and some place in New Jersey, there was like 2 people in the place. It was just crap. So it's unbelievable that it's still going and that there's 2 versions. And everybody, people ask me all the time, will they ever get back together? They're never going to get back together because Mick will never do it. There's so much bad blood now between the Kelly and Steve and Tracy and Phil and who said what. And the only way it would ever happen is if somebody came along and offered them millions of dollars, but that's never going to happen because there's not enough people that want to go see it. They never had hit songs. I mean, Ballad of Jane was a top 40 hit. I think it hit the top 40 at number 40 and then like dropped the next week. Like, so that song was big because of MTV. LA Guns wasn't a hit song band. And if you don't have hit songs, you can't survive. There's a casino down the road from me here where I live, I don't know, 40 miles away. And they do a lot of the casino shows. And some of those bands are getting good money to play casinos because they had one song that was big, whether it's the Bangles or whoever. They had a song or 2 that was still getting played on 80s radio. Was a pop song. So if you don't have that, you can't survive. You can't get in that casino circuit because you have no hits. Got to have hits. And LA Guns wasn't a hit song kind of band.
Crazy. So, all right. So the book is going to be out early next year. What made you finally decide to write a book?
Well, I had written for a long time, stories and bits and pieces, and then COVID came, and nobody was working, and I sat around for a year and started going through all my old stories and all the things I'd written and started putting together my story of my life in music as a fan and then as somebody that eventually worked in the business, and it chronicles my life in the music business. It's not a story of my life total. It's just my life in music. So, and I just started writing this story, and I've got so many pictures. And that's how I started really with the Instagram. My Instagram, 1985 Road Dog, was I have all these pictures, and then I just started posting pictures, and I was writing my book, and people really were responding to it. And it took me a long time, honestly, to be able to look back at all of this stuff and not feel attached to it. I'm a different person today than I was yesterday. So as I grow and mature, and you're able to disassociate yourself from the emotional feelings of any of that, whether it was good or bad, or I can't look at that picture because I was a coked out mess or whatever. So I've gotten past all that, and I look at it now as like that was somebody that doesn't exist anymore. So it's like I'm able to focus on talking about it and writing about it and posting pictures about it because I don't associate myself with that person. I'm not that person anymore. That was a guy that used to be, that's gone now. And not everybody looks at life that way, but that's how, when you resist change, you resist life. So life changes, and you better roll with the changes or you're going to get rolled over. So, that's just how it goes. So I was at a point in my life where I was able to look back at it and go, oh, that guy was an asshole, but man, it was fun, So talking about myself. So that led to, it's like a freedom that just, COVID and I don't say COVID, the pandemic made you really, take stock and look at your life and what you're doing and where you're putting your energy and all this stuff. So I'm just at a different place now. Hence, I live in the desert. So I'm able to look at it all and and laugh with it. People, 20, 30 years ago, somebody would have said, "Oh, you suck" or whatever, and I would have gotten offended. Like, I don't care what you think. It doesn't affect me. It affects your feelings. It only affects me if I let it. So So I'm able to look back at stuff and like, even Sweet Pain is like a very touchy subject for a long time. Sweet Pain. There's
Wow.
people, Kelly didn't want to know about it. Ex-members were like, very angry, so it was just like, but now I can look at it all and go, hey, whatever, man. Like it was what it was. If people want to hear about it, I'll talk about it. But for a long time, I wouldn't talk about it. It was just, I've done a few things here or there, I spoke to a few people, over the years, pre all these apps and chats and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a funny story. I just remembered this. One time, LA Guns was playing in New Jersey at a place somewhere, and Phil Collins from Def Leppard was in town, and he came down to the club gig and played Jam with LA Guns on Hollywood Tees, which is an old girl song that Phil Collins was in Girl with Phil Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
So we're sitting on the bus, and Phil Collins, somebody mentioned Sweet Pain, and Phil Collins started going, "Oh, that crazy glam band, we used to listen to that before we went on stage. That Get My Kicks." He's like, "That's like the Beastie Boys or something." And Kelly goes, "Oh, you're kidding me. That's the singer right there." And Phil Collins couldn't believe it. And he was telling the story about they would listen to I Get My Kicks backstage before they would go on. And because it would get him psyched up.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, and he had no clue who I was. And it was just like, because I'm totally different. I got short hair. I'm the
yeah.
So, I mean, it was just that record. Like I said, either you get it or you don't. Either you like it or you hate it. It's like it was never meant to be middle of the road. So, that is just, I was shocked by that story. But
that's crazy.
They got it, I guess. I mean, not everybody got it.
I always thought that album was like if the New York Dolls were around for the glam era of the 80s. That's what I thought. I thought it was like a true spin-off to that, and it had that that true New York, that dirty, trashy New York feel of the Dolls.
Yeah, I mean the Dolls. I never saw the Dolls, but anybody that saw the Dolls would tell you how horrible they were. That they were great, that they looked great, and they were the energy and the attitude. But they weren't the tightest band. Although Jerry Nolan, the drummer in the Dolls, was an incredible drummer. But it was a lot of that attitude. We just wanted to dress up and we wanted to be glammy. And I was really in tune to the whole Hanoi Rocks thing. You got to remember, Poison, I wouldn't call Poison glam. I guess they kind of were. Poison were not glam in the true sense of the word. Poison were like,
not with the music, no.
They were like a cartoon come to life kind of Poison. They were very colorful and neon colors and all that stuff. Sweet Pain was more, yes, we were influenced visually by Kiss, Hanoi Rocks, and the Dolls. We tried to be, dressing in women's clothes and all that kind of stuff. But it was about being that punk thing too. It was like, we look like this, but we'll jump in the audience and fight you. You know what I mean? That was kind of the attitude. So it turned a lot of people off because I would jump in the crowd. I didn't give a shit. I mean, we did a show in Cleveland one time and a guy got up on stage, jumped up on the stage. He had a Metallica shirt on and he was threatening me. And I don't know, he grabbed a mic and I always had like one of those like metal baseball bats behind the amp because you never know. And I just took the bat out, man, and started swinging. And and I guess in Ohio at the time, they still had police that would check IDs at the door. And the cops just grabbed me, handcuffed me. I mean, I was crazy, man, but I was amped up on drugs and alcohol and, whiskey, and I didn't give a shit. And that was my attitude at the time. I didn't care, get in my face. I'm going to hit you with a bat. I mean, it turned a lot of people off. No one expected the band that looked like the band on that album cover to act like that. So it was very, like I said, either you got it or you didn't. And most people didn't get it. And the ones that did love it, But I hear from people there, occasionally that that was my favorite record. I listened to it in the car before school, and I'm like, that's awesome. I mean, you know, they got it. Most people didn't get it.
Do you have a copy of it yourself?
I've got a couple copies. I've got a cassette or two. You know, but you know, I just, you know, so what we did was, if you remember, there was an album, and then the cassette had an extra song.
Yeah.
So what I did for this remix new version that I put together is I put the extra cassette song on there, and then we did a version of Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, the Elton John song. So that was one take, no overdubs, whatever it was. We just, that was it. It was like a leftover.
Wow.
So I put that on there. And then there's I've got 4 live songs from that gig at Le Maurice where we had 2,000 people. I have 4 live songs. I think 2 of them are covers. One's a cover of Mama Kin, the Aerosmith song, and one's a cover of I think it's Personality Crisis by the Dolls. And then I put a lot of these radio interviews. I did crazy radio interviews with, like, up at K Rock in New York and DHA, and we did one at YSP, and you know, at the end of the interview, they give you a cassette of it.
The old metal shop with Mark Didia.
We did Mark Didia Metal Shop in New York at K Rock, and then we did I think it was Kenny Didia at YSP.
It was me and Ed Green and Ken Sharp. After Mark, they were with Mark, and then Mark left, and then they took over.
Right. So we did all those radio shows, and you know, they're always at 2 a.m. or whatever, and we'd be so coked up and fucked up, and just, you know, and it's just hilarious. A lot of it. It was just, I mean, I remember going out after those things. You know, it'd be 4 a.m. We'd leave with the DJ. We'd be all fucked up. We'd go to some bar. You know, you'd be up for a day and a half after that, just because everybody did that. I never met anybody that was in a radio DJ or any of that stuff that didn't do cocaine. Like, they all did it, especially the guys that did the metal shows.
Yeah.
You know, so but I've got some of those interviews on this re-release that, you know, hopefully one day it'll come out. You know.
It's going to come out. Trust me. I'm going to put you in touch.
That'd be awesome, man. You know, I mean, it was never on CD. You know, that when Relativity was sold to Sony didn't opt to put out every release. Like, they would, of course, Sony would re-release, you know, the Megadeth record or whatever the deal was, or whatever. They own the catalog, but they didn't always re-release everything. There's a lot of that Combat and Relativity stuff that never went on CD. What's this band? I can't remember remember a band called Action, AXTION.
I think so. Yeah.
There's a band called Liege Lord. There's so much stuff that they put out so many records, man, tons of them. So, you know, then the Sweet Pain was one of those that just never got, no one, you know, it never sold enough numbers initially for them to care about it, you know. I mean, we probably sold, I don't know, 5,000, 8,000 copies, maybe. You know, you're making me think of all this stuff. You know, Ross Halfin, the photographer?
Yeah.
Ross Halfin's a huge British photographer going back to the Kerrang magazine days and stuff. Ross, you know, there's a magazine in England called Record Collector. And every issue, they pick somebody to give their most collectible records. And somebody sent me a magazine. This is years ago. Ross Halfin got to see as the Sweet Pain record in there as one of his most valuable records and one of his favorite collectibles. And I'm like, you're kidding me. He's got it in there, you know. And I'm like, how or why? He might have heard about it from the Def Leppard guys because they were very tight.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it's just like he's got it in his favorite collectibles. I'm like, okay. But there wasn't a lot of that record pressed. Maybe 8,000 copies, maybe.
Well, I mean, dude, I'm telling you, like, I honestly, like, before the whole vinyl comeback of the last few years, like, I had unloaded years ago most of my vinyl. I kept my Kiss, my Hanoi Rocks, my Sweet Pain, my import, like, Motley Crue stuff, and anything I had, because I'm a huge Randy Rhoads nut. So anything I had on vinyl of Randy Rhoads, bootlegs and stuff. That's all I kept. So
I got rid of all my vinyl pretty much. I wish I didn't, man. I had so much vinyl. It's just like, oh, this is never coming back. Now it's CDs.
exactly.
So yeah, but that's amazing that you kept that. I mean, I see them occasionally online, eBay or whatever, 30, $40. But I think I've got a couple sealed copies. But it was not a big press. That's why people want it, because it wasn't like flooded. It was, I would say 5,000 to 8,000 in there. That's what was pressed. So it's like, everybody thinks Michael Jackson Thriller is worth money. It's not worth money because they pressed 40 million of them.
Yeah.
So if there's a small pressing, not a lot pressed, it becomes more valuable. So I guess Sweet Pain falls in there somewhere.
Crazy. So, all right. So, where is the best place for us to have everybody go? Is it the Instagram, YouTube, both?
Go to the Instagram, because it's the easiest. Go to 1985 Road, ROAD Dog, and there's a link in my bio for my YouTube page.
Okay.
So YouTube's hard to find sometimes. So
yeah,
just the best place to send me a message or whatever. Or find that link to the YouTube is the Instagram is the best.
Cool. Mike, thanks so much for doing this. Seriously, email me, send me a message with your email, and I'm gonna call my buddy today, and I'm dead serious. I'm gonna have this is gonna fucking happen.
I'm ready, man. I'll definitely get it to you, and thank you so much for having me on and letting me talk my shit here. So I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, when the book comes back out, let's do it again.
Absolutely. I definitely will.
Cool, man. All right, dude. Keep in touch.
Peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you.